there was a rather strange, eerie feeling. We knew there was a connection. We just didn't know the full extent of that connection.
We selected the Derwent Valley and Derbyshire more broadly as a place to do this research, partly because that area has within it a World Heritage Site which is designated due to the importance of the early cotton industry in the area. Cromford is renowned for being the world's first water-powered cotton spinning mill. So it was a really interesting place to highlight that these gaps exist. Because some of these histories that we're dealing with are quite challenging and difficult histories, how one addresses those histories is also an issue. So it's not just the gaps, but it's how one goes about addressing those gaps. That it's much better to work with people who come from those descendant communities to help decide on how these issues should be addressed, rather than academics coming in and saying this is how it should be done.
It's interesting that you asked me how I feel about that first trip to the mills. I'd been there before, many, many times, but it never occurred to me that it related at all to my background, my history. So on this trip, and after it had been explained at the opening of this project, I thought that maybe I would learn a bit more. And sure enough, I did.
Serious now.
And it was a nice day. It was nice and warm. The scenery was very nice, beautiful. But that's not what we came for, you know what I mean? So you had to bypass that and actually look at, what is this really all about? Is it just about a nice day out? It is just about people wanting to learn information from us? Or is it for us to really kind of use this experience to explore more about who we are ourselves and the connection between us as descendants of slaves to these people who were using the labors of these people, free labor, to really become excessively rich.
We knew that our ancestors were involved somewhere along the line in this lucrative cotton industry. And to some extent, it would have been useful and it would have been better for us had there been a little bit more information so that we could get a little closer to bridging that gap. Because, I mean, we were there for a specific purpose, to identify the connection between the cotton industry and the slave trade industry.
I've never been before, and there's no mention of where this cotton came from. We talked about picking it up from the docks or from the barges, but there's no mention of how it got to the barges or how it got to the docks. And I think for a black person coming to a mill like this and not having no recollection or them not mentioning the fact that it came on the backs of slaves, I think it's quite sad, really. That's how I feel. I mean, it's interesting and everything, but I feel quite sad standing here, really, if I'm honest.
In the case of this one guide, nothing else had been explained, and it was a case of leaving out vital elements. In my case, it made me feel further alienated. Like, this society is not a society that I belong in.
It's a good thing that we're exploring slavery
it also teaches people things. I mean, I'm learning as well. So, and I thought I knew quite a bit about slavery, but I'm learning more, about how things happened. And then you go on the internet and you research things and you find out a bit more. And it brings people, I think, closer together to find out that we are one human family and not, you know, white people, black people, because everyone came from Africa, and that's scientific fact. We migrated and changed over the course of moving over the planet over thousands of years, so from black to white and Asian and whatever. So these are the things people need to know so that we can move forward.
Personally, I felt that maybe some people didn't want that information in the public domain because that may have caused too much of a problem for some. But for me, having the information was the important factor, not whether it caused embarrassment to anybody, because for me, it wasn't about blaming anybody for what took place before their time. It was about identifying the information and for the truth of the cotton industry and its connection with the slave trade to be known.
It was all right to have the cotton, but where the cotton came from was not important. And that made me feel very sad, because when I think of the people who worked in the plantations and how hard they work, and to see that, even their labor was reduced to nothing, that was very painful.
It's always very useful to have involvement from different communities of interest, different ideals, because actually they challenge what often your preconceptions of what a project or what the interpretation should be. So I think that element of challenge which the participants gave to the staff here was very, very useful.
All good to the people who actually doing the research and how we kind of got linked onto it, and for us ourselves to do more research about what it was for the black people who were enslaved during that period. It should never be swept under the carpet.
We have had 2 projects now. Both have been quite short term, but we've looked specifically for funding to try and further develop our linkages with local community groups through getting small pots of funding. Obviously, we will try and get some further funding, but there's no guarantee we'd necessarily get that. So the way in which I see myself as working in the future is to continue to liaise with Bright Ideas and the Slave Trade Legacies group under that banner, to be available to people if they want to ask me about projects or to discuss ideas or to come and present at the university about what they've been doing.
We are hopeful that after much ado and protests from the group, that they will incorporate something meaningful, not some picture in isolation that they've actually just want to tag on to the exhibition. We want it to be an integral part of what they're doing.
Well, I think looking at the slave trade and its impact on British society, I think universally it's taken a long time to actually recognise how much it did impact on things like the growth of places like Liverpool, Bristol, Glasgow, its impact on the banking system, all those things. The slave trade sort of infected, if you like, a huge amount of British society, and for a long time it really wasn't owned up to. So I think over the past 20 years there's been a recognition of that, and a lot of that is due to research by academics, the development of things like Black History Month, which I think have been very important, and also a greater cultural awareness of Black history.
Prior to this particular project initiated by Nottingham University, there was no such initiative. So in one sense, that is a good thing. I joined this project where I was saying, well, actually, I'm not really too sure about that. We should kind of leave that one alone because it's really too painful. Well, I'm at the beginning of another journey, and it's one that I believe I will continue, and I'm hoping that others will want to take.
A sack full of cotton. Of course, cotton came from Liverpool via pack horse. But where was that import sourced? Enslaved Africans were forced and whipped and flogged and beaten to ensure the supply of cotton. The traces of a landscape shaped by the slave trade. Visible legacies still last of the industrial past. But what about our legacy? We whose ancestors died through slavery. The missing information of enslavement plantations enabled an empire to rise higher, to climb hills and build mills, as they wiped their hands clean of the places they'd been, onto white cotton handkerchiefs. Further pain will be continuously caused if we don't include the story before Wilberforce. The true cost of lives lost, my legacy, my ancestry,